how do you decide what to work on?
I look for certain features. Is it a problem that has any interesting scope for impact? Because that is important to me. Are there other smart people already working in this space or are willing to head into this space with me? Will I learn something, or is it something that I've done for a few years and therefore I kind of understand and I'm kind of bored? And maybe all that is left are the millennium problems, and there's like, it's just a barren landscape with just really hard, sheer vertical cliffs. And in some sense, ultimately, is this going to be fun? Is this going to be a fun journey with smart people taking on ambitious problems with some reasonable probability of success?
How do you decide what to work on?
I tend to just do the things that matter the most to me. So I've just sort of followed a trajectory where I've like dug further and further into how to like evolve AI in a long-term positive way. And so anything I find in my path that is unsolved or particularly messy, for some reason I end up working on really messy things. I end up taking those on. I'm a little bit surprised at how much I've ended up focusing on launching things at Google. I didn't know that I would be that I didn't know I would be that pulled into product. But it's kind of a situation where, in light of like long-term positive goals, like, we can make this change and affect like 2 billion users. Maybe I don't need to write this paper. Maybe it's better that I like implement this and make this real. So yeah, it's kind of, I tend to just sort of think through like, how do I maximize the goodness or the long-term benefit of the work I'm doing, and then sort of choose projects that way. Which means I work on data ethics and face recognition, like the worst, like most difficult things to work on AI ethics right now. But I think that kind of appeals to me.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
Okay, so I think that I like working on projects that I think they fit a little bit what I think my friends think my personality is. I like working in projects that are fun, that are, deep, deep in some sense, but that are also creative and a little bit crazy. I don't like starting a project that starts with a question that is too well posed. I like more starting with things that it looks like, this is just not going to work. I mean, it's a little bit crazy, and which is the difficulty there is to convince the students to work on that too. They might see that in the past you have done some interesting work that was a little bit crazy and creative, but the idea that you are giving them now, that one is just too crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a little bit that. So that's how I chose working on projects. I love working on a project that you get excited by it. You don't know the answer, but you know that if this works this way, or or something happens, then it's going to be so cool, and that's what.
Yeah.
That's how I chose this.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
For me, it has to be, of course, it has to be something I'm very interested in, but there are lots of things I'm interested in. It has to be something where I feel I have an angle that's interesting. So it's interesting to me, but also I feel I have something to contribute where I have a perspective that's good. And also, if it's a project with people that I know I work with well, then that's going to be a big plus too. So it's kind of this conjunction of things.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
How do I decide what to work on? I think, okay, first, I mean, it starts off with a phase of a lot of exploration and, various experiences, right? So talking to people, reading books and so on. And that stage is not very directed. I think it is just what you are doing, right? And then for me, it's very much an aha moment. At some point, someday I wake up and I really feel, okay, I need to do this. And to me, this is at a larger scale than the more standard question, which is, okay, you're working on a certain problem and you're trying to figure out how to solve it, right? So, I mean, it's the nature of creativity that it's been well studied. So there is a phase which is what people call preparation and incubation. So preparation is you read about relevant things, you talk to people, you think about it. Incubation is, I mean, it's there somewhere in your brain stewing. And it may not necessarily yield from direct assault at the problem, but you wake up or you're in a shower and then you have some idea, right? I think that to me, deciding what problem to work on is the same, or what area to go into. Then you can think about it very consciously and put down the pros and cons. And, I think I have this equation, which is that you need to look at, in order to have a maximum impact, you need to consider the product of two terms. One is importance and the other is influenceability. Okay. The importance is how important is the problem. Okay. I mean, there are certain problems which are easy to solve, but they're not very important. Okay. Then there's influenceability, which has to do with your own capability to move the needle. Okay. I mean, so world hunger is very important, but my ability to move on the needle is zero. Okay. So what you should do is you should look for problems where you have a high product of importance and influenceability. So this is my equation. Impact equals importance multiplied with influenceability.
Yeah. Makes sense. How do you decide what to work on?
It's kind of hard to describe, but sometimes there's just like it starts with more of a conceptual idea. So especially previously, I think now I'm a bit more strategic about, okay, there's this one problem that a relatively concrete problem that I would like to solve. And then I will think about a sort of methodological idea for how to solve it. But what will get me excited is the methodological idea. If it's like neat or new, or it's something someone has never tried, or and sufficiently different from how people have been addressing similar problems or something like that, that will get me excited, and then that's what will push me to work on something. And then before that, so now like I maybe think a bit more about what is the problem that I'm going to focus on before I start thinking about ideas. I think before sometimes just have like a model idea or a methods idea, and I'd be like, oh, that's bound to be useful for something, and I find it really, really neat. So let's just figure out to what it could apply and be useful for, and that I do like more sort of unbounded exploration like that. I do a bit less. I try to be a bit more intentional in what is the problem that I'll be addressing.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
It's a mix of what am I really excited about, and there's usually things that I'm excited about, and I kind of really I love this feeling of like starting a new project and imagining what this project can be, and kind of getting in place all the conditions to make it successful. About 6 months ago, we sort of pivoted to start a COVID project in collaboration with some of the local hospitals and universities and getting people involved. And so very much when I have these kinds of a project that I'm passionate about, I think that really energizes me. But it's a mix of that and also just like really rigorous, like what needs to be done today, right now, right? Like, and being, I feel a sense of responsibility for just the people that I work with. And so if I'm the person kind of delaying other people from, doing what they want to do and getting what they want to do, that doesn't sit very well for me. I want to be someone who kind of enables other people to do their work better rather than slows them down. And that it has a lot of importance for me.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
This is almost entirely a function of the people around me. So, the typical pattern for my PhD students is they come to me and say, I'm interested in X. Okay, here's what I know about X. Here's some people, in the group who know a little more about the details of X than I do right now. Here's some historical context. Here are some good reasons to work on X. Here are some reasons you might not want to work on X. Then they come back the next week and say, I want to work on X prime. And we have the same conversation. So I'm more of I give advice and guidance, but I don't have a major agenda at the moment. There are a lot of things I care about. And I can see the value in investing in many different angles. And I don't feel the need to tie all of my projects together in one coherent direction. I think that's a very good career strategy for people when they're still building and they want to build a reputation and be seen and be visible and be associated with certain ideas. That's a good thing to do. And I did that at one point. But at some point you may hit, a level where you have invested in a lot of things. You care about a lot of them. You can't work on them all the time. One example is I think machine translation is a fantastic problem. It was the first thing I worked on when I got into the field. I ditched it in grad school because I was unhappy about some developments and the way things were headed and didn't work on it for a while. Came back to it as an early faculty member when I had a student who wanted to work on it. When that person finished, I moved on, didn't pay much attention, here and there I'd read a paper, got away from it again, coming back now because my students want to work on it. And so, you can kind of come and go. Nobody in the machine translation community is going to tell you that I'm a major player in that world, but I know what's going on. I think I can say things that are useful and help guide a student who wants to be. And so I think a little bit of distance is actually sometimes a very healthy thing for making contributions. I think in science, it's often the case that the big changes come from an outside influence, right? There's two fields that butt up against each other and ideas cross-fertilize, and then it has a big effect on one or both, and things change. And so I kind of feel like being on the edge of things, not being right in the middle, gives you some perspective sometimes, and you have better chance of making those kinds of connections.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you decide what to work on?
That one I do have a formula for. I do what I love. And I just let myself do that. Yeah. And so anyway. I mean, I love it when I do, when we and my students and I in postdocs, when we do something really special and wonderful. But mostly I want to do things that are fun and unusual. And if it's not fun and unusual, then what's the point? So, yeah.
How do you decide what to work on?
I think one of the biggest factors is something that I'm already comfortable with. So sort of the research that I've been doing so far, I I'm generally more comfortable with exploring more in that space than like going out of that space and trying out something new. So that is one factor. Second is I try to think about the research so far that I've been doing, what is lagging in that space and what needs to be done to sort of keep like to go from current point to solving AGI, but in that niche domain. So I try and think about that. And usually, yeah, I like figuring out what's wrong with current models and poking them, digging deeper into them and figuring out what needs to be done next.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
So again, I put a lot of things on my list of things to do. And there are some things that are like have to be done, which you have no choice. And then the other things, it really kind of depends on what I feel like in the morning. And so I'll look at it, and if it's like, oh, I think I will, write that proposal because, I think I have a good idea, I'll just start on that one. So there's a lot of randomization outside of the, these have to be done.
How do you decide what to work on?
I usually try to think about so there's like two axes, I guess. So one is that I think about like the larger intellectual challenge that I'm interested in, which is like, how do we create some kind of intelligent system? And I think about like what that intelligence means, like how the adaptability to different tasks and the ways of like bringing in different sensor information, having memory, developing like capabilities, and almost like a personality that we're interacting with people, interacting with things. So I think about like that big goal, and then I look to see like what's missing the most, and then like what are the immediate steps that we could take to try to close that gap a little bit. So that's like one way that I think about it. And then the other is just in terms of more immediate, like practical opportunities. Like if there's a problem that I think could be addressed, or that like state of the art is kind of close to it, or it's something that's like achievable, then what's, focus on the solution to that problem. But overall, I tend to be more like conceptually motivated by the like long-term goal than practical, like on average.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
For me, it's a lot of it is how new and how difficult is it. So, I mean, to me, like, there has to be like research means, right, that there isn't already a full path laid out. And if you're worried about scooping out, somebody getting, having this scooped up, right, somebody doing it before us, I don't think that's the right problem to solve. So I want to work on challenges that are more long-term, that are extremely difficult, but we can make concrete headway, right? And what would be the toy version of that problem? Is that too trivial, or is there, again, some good insights? So I like to break down a very complex puzzle into simple pieces and work on it for a longer time. And also think about, right, like kind of learning and getting inspirations from new areas, especially other areas of sciences and neuroscience that can help bring new ideas. Yeah. So yeah, that kind of constant like kind of exploration and lifelong learning AI terms, and solving non-obvious problems.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
Very unscientifically, I think. I think in some cases there are things that external constraints help me do what I'm doing, but I try, in the cases where I have freedom, I really let my subconscious drive me to what is done next. And I started doing that much more when I realized that often in life we have this weird thing where we put a plan together, but things will always deviate from it. And generally they're not uniform deviation. Things deviate in one way. So for example, if I go on a trip and I expect to arrive 5 hours from now on a plane, if I get delayed, I could arrive another 4 hours later, but it's unlikely I'll arrive 4 hours early.
Mm.
So a lot of the unexpected things in our life tend to derail those plans, but you have to also leave space for the opportunities that are positive. And if you've constrained yourself to operating too much on a plan, then you're only going to be exposed to the negative side of unanticipated occurrences. And I want to be open to the positive serendipitous moments, and I have to find a way to give them space.
Interesting.
And so that's something that I think I changed over time to try to find ways to make that possible.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
I usually like to find a project I can work on with other people, and where the other people know different things than I know. And so you then end up teaching each other a lot in the course of doing work.
Yeah. How do you decide what to work on?
How do you decide what to work on? That's interesting. So typically I don't have a clear answer for that. Basically, I want to work on something that I like to work on something that has kind of, I usually think about, like, when students come to me and say they want to work on that, X, I usually will think about, okay, suppose you do everything right, what will you be proud of that? Be kind of passionate about what you're going to show. So I think I like to think backward in terms of, okay, suppose you do everything right, these techniques, X, Y, Z techniques, you solve everything. Will that be good for you? And if not, then just drop it. If yes, then let's go for it. So I like to think in terms of the end product, right? So, and I want to be typically I try to work on something that kind of can reveal something that we couldn't see in the original images or videos, so something that can surprise us.
Yeah.